Since the beginning of time, people have struggled with hair loss, and for millennia, wigs have offered the perfect solution to the problem. In popular culture, men in the 18th century were adorned with white curly wigs as part of their daily getup. The portrait of the Founding Fathers by Gilbert Stuart shows 5 of the 6 presidents of the United States with pure white hair. Most people who look at the portrait assume that the Founding Fathers wore wigs. However, by the time of the American Revolution, wigs were out of fashion. The trend of powdering one's natural hair replaced wigs. During the second half of the 18th century, wigs were a status symbol. However, by the 1800s, they were out of fashion by short hair. Ailments, cleanliness, politics, and costs were the factors that contributed to the decline of powdered wigs. In this Liber-Tea episode, we will be discussing the history of powdered wigs and their downfall. During the 17th century, hairlines played a critical role in fashion. A proper hairline signified a well-bred man. Unfortunately, during this time, syphilis was ravaging Europe. According to records, syphilis affected more Europeans than the bubonic plague at the time of this outbreak. During this time, the discovery of antibiotics was yet to happen. People infected with syphilis suffered all the symptoms, including patchy hair loss, dementia, blindness, and nasty sores. As good hair was a status symbol, hair loss and baldness compounded the shame of contracting syphilis. Over history, wigs conceal hair loss. The use of wigs became widespread when 2 monarchs began losing their hair. King Louis XIV of France, popularly known as the Sun King, was extremely vain. He commissioned over 30 portraits of himself to celebrate his rule during his reign. Alas, vanity is not the preserve of millennials only. Unfortunately, his mental image of himself did not match his physical appearance. King Louis XIV began losing his hair at 17 years. Consequently, he hired over 48 wig makers to remedy the situation. In England, his cousin, King Charles II, adopted the use of wigs when his hair began to gray prematurely. Both kings probably had syphilis due to their numerous trysts. As the saying goes, imitation is the best form of flattery. Courtiers soon began wearing wigs, and the fashion trend found its way to the merchant class. The wigs were convenient and easy to maintain. They were occasionally sent to wig makers for delousing. As the popularity of wigs increased, they became status symbols that indicated a person's social position. The term big wig originates from this era. In the UK, an ordinary wig cost 25 shilling in the 1700s, a week's worth of wages for an ordinary person. Nobles blew small fortunes on wigs. They would spend upwards of 800 shillings on wigs. Adjusted to inflation, 800 shillings translates to 10,193 US dollars or 8,297 British pounds. The syphilis outbreak stimulated the demand for wigs. Victims concealed their bloody sores and baldness with wigs made of human, goat, and horse hair. Perukes, or wigs, were coated with powder scented with orange or lavender. This also helped to hide their funky aromas. While ordinary wigs were not very stylish, they acted as a shameful necessity. British colonial governors wore wigs. Many portraits of political debates and discussions show men with white hair, which is commonly assumed to be perukes. However, this was probably before the beginning of the American Revolution. Although wigs were associated with aristocracy, not all patriots depicted in various portraits wore wigs during the time. After George Washington, Presidents Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, James Madison, and James Monroe wore wigs. Women also wore wigs. However, English women did not adopt the fashion trend as enthusiastically as their French counterparts. Queen Marie Antoinette, for instance, was famous for her flamboyant wigs and fashion sense. During the late 18th century, wigs began falling out of fashion. Powdered wigs were ousted after the French Revolution. The British stopped wearing perukes when William Pitt, in 1795, introduced a tax on hair powder. Following the ousting of the peruke, short, natural hair became the next fashion craze, which lasted for more than 200 years. The Age of Enlightenment inspired a new mentality where privileged and educated people became concerned with the struggles of the common person. As the bourgeoisie class grew, extravagant spending on hair and fashion was viewed as ignorance. During the French Revolution, wigs were viewed as a symbol of the aristocracy. In the spirit of revolution, people stopped wearing wigs. In addition, the wealthy bourgeoisie was keen not to be associated with the aristocracy, who frequently lost their wigged heads to the guillotine. The rebels even beheaded the king and the queen. While perukes were worn to conceal the effects of syphilis, people began suspecting people who wore wigs to be hiding deeper secrets. Following the enhancement of the Hair Powder Act by William Pitt, the younger, only members of the royal family, the clergy, and members of parliament were allowed to wear powdered wigs. Ordinary people who wanted to wear perukes were required to buy a certificate worth $122 in today's estimation to purchase hair powder. Perukes have a tremendous impact on historical remembrance. They are perceived as a symbol of the late 17th century. Movies seem to be excited about misrepresenting the proliferation of powdered wigs. The TV show Turn, for example, depicts every English soldier to be wearing a peruke, while the Pirates of the Caribbean often depicted a few British soldiers wearing perukes. They still made an appearance. According to the Revolutionary War, wigs were hot and heavy, extremely costly, and often infested with bugs. This made them less than ideal for the military. Just as the gentry wore different wigs from the commoners, officers did not wear wigs as enlisted men did. They plaited their hair or wore fake plaits. The lasting legacy of perukes is undeniable. Today, British barristers and judges continue to wear wigs. Legal practitioners and parliamentarians in various Commonwealth countries also wear perukes to date. However, unlike in the 17th century today, wigs are worn ceremonially. Since fashion is cyclical, maybe we will witness the return of perukes one day. Over 200 centuries ago, powdered wigs were a hot fashion trend. However, these chic hairpieces may never have become fashion hits were it not for the syphilis outbreak, poor hair hygiene, and two very self-conscious monarchs. Without antibiotics, victims of syphilis bore the full brunt of the disease, including dementia, nasty sores, rushes, blindness, and patchy hair loss. Following the pandemic, baldness swept across Europe. At the time, hair loss was a source of embarrassment. A good hairline was considered the symbol of proper breeding. Balding could injure anyone's reputation tremendously. This made wigs a necessity. Like, share, and subscribe to the Liber-Tea channel for more exciting journeys back in time. Join us as we unearth the origins of various interesting phenomena across the wheel of time. If you have any contributions to the discussions or requests for future videos, feel free to leave your comments below.